Yeah, as a result of the Teal Fellowship and dropping out of school, I mean, it profoundly changed my life. I met my eventual co-founder from Speak. I sold my first company as a result of the network that I gained in the Teal Fellowship. In the case of deep learning and AI and machine learning and where it's gone in the last 5 years, for us starting Speak, we became very convinced that because of this technology, the world was going to change in a multitude of ways. Absolutely convinced. So we did a program called Y-Combinator, or YC for short, in the beginning of Speak, and it's a bit of a legendary organization in Silicon Valley. It gives you about $100,000 in funding for 7% of your company. Except this accelerator is the one that's funded Dropbox, Airbnb, Stripe, and many other really large companies. And they take people in 2 batches a year. And what you do is you start the program and then you do it for about 2.5 months. You go every single week to their headquarters and you meet with their partners. The partners give you advice, and they also ask you really hard questions about your company. How much have you grown? What have you done since the last week? And they basically create this environment where you can grow as fast as possible. And then at the end of it, you get the chance to basically go in front of a room of investors, a lot of the best investors in the world, and basically pitch your company. I remember thinking about whether or not to do YC in the beginning of the company. In my view, it was like I'd already done one company and it didn't really feel like the deal that YC provides, which is 7% of your company for a pretty small amount of funding, was worth it to me. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine who had done YC. Their company had become really successful. And I remember asking her about this, and she was shocked that I wouldn't consider YC. And she was like, why would you possibly not consider YC? It is like an accelerant for your company. It's worth every single point of equity that you take. And something immediately shifted in my head and became convinced that I should do YC. And in fact, in my class, there were at least 3 people who had founded previous companies that were either worth over $500 million, or in one case, there was someone that was in my YC cohort who had already started a $1 billion company, and they did YC again. I think there are 2 main things. The number 1 thing is talk to your users. Talk to them obsessively over and over again. The second piece of advice is, unless you build something that people love, you won't have traction and you're not gonna have what they call product market fit, which means that people will actually love what you're doing enough that you can build an actually real sustainable business. Doing a startup is obviously incredibly hard, and there's many road bumps along the way. In fact, Paul Graham, the founder of YC, has a famous phrase that's called the trough of sorrow, where companies raise a little bit of money and then they just go back down into this trough. And then hopefully you don't die along the way and you get product market fit and then you go back up. One of the most challenging periods in the journey of Speak so far is that after we did YC, after we raised this money, we had to go build the product. We knew we had this technology, but we didn't know what product to build. We built a product, we spent a long time on it, and we tried to talk to users, and it seemed like they liked it, and then we released it, and no one cared. At this time, it was actually global. So we released an app everywhere. We even made it free. We didn't even charge anything for it. We just wanted people to use it. And we couldn't even get people to use it. They would download the app, and they would just kind of forget about it immediately. It took us the better part of a year of talking to users and not really knowing what we needed to change to figure it out. It was incredibly difficult from a morale perspective to go into work every day and work on something and then for it not to work. I'd have to send a monthly investor update where I would show our graphs, and none of them would be going up month after month after month. I think there were 2 main things that we learned eventually. I think the first one was we literally had to go to the countries and we asked them what went wrong. We learned that the average user of a product was actually just far too casual. And instead, the users that we actually wanted, the app wasn't good enough for them because it wasn't intense enough. And the people that really actually needed this wanted something that was far more involved and intense and less kind of fun and easy to use. Let's just focus on the users that actually love us and just build a product for the power users, and the rest will take care of itself. We ended up building something for them that looked completely different than what we currently offered. The second lesson we learned was when we went to all these countries, we realized They're all so different. We need to focus on one market and we need to just build for that market. And sure, growth will be slower overall if we're only operating in one market versus 10 or 20. But all that matters is building a product that people love. And that's a lot more doable if you focus in on one market first. Yeah, so before starting Speak, I by no means was a language learning expert. In fact, I knew very little. I definitely approached this from the technology side. But we consulted a bunch of experts and kind of learned the latest and greatest, and I traveled to numerous countries, including Korea. And the thing that I heard over and over again from everyone, and especially people in Korea, is that the real problem is getting an opportunity to actually practice speaking English. And so our entire observation and thesis is that if you can make it as easy to practice speaking as it is to watch a YouTube video or to listen to a song, then we can make learning English and making it so that you're actually fluent at a spoken level something that's possible for so many more people than it is today. The vast majority of people never get there, and we want to change that, and that's kind of the goal. People always ask us first, why the Korea market? We definitely want to go global, but Korea is the first market that we picked, and the first reason is that I went to many countries. I went to Malaysia, I went to Taiwan, I went to Japan, I went to all of these places and talked with users, and I asked them about their problems. And the thing that immediately stood out about Korea over all these other markets is that the amount of dedication and will that the average Korean person puts into learning English is unbelievable. I remember driving down the street in Gangnam and seeing these skyscrapers that were literally all just hagwons with classrooms inside dedicated to learning English. I remember distinctly a conversation with a user who went to SNU, majored in English. She knew more grammatically and from a vocabulary perspective than I did about English, but she had no confidence at all in speaking English. And that was because she never got the opportunity to actually practice speaking it. The second reason is that Korea is really, I think from a global perspective, someone outside looking in, it's very much an early adopter and a trendsetter. I mean, you look at how you guys were ahead of the curve on before Twitch, there was Africa TV, all these other services that you guys kind of did your own version of before everyone else was doing. And also that there's this sort of export that happens. It's crazy how big K-pop and K-dramas are in the United States now. So we believe that if we could catch the Korean market and make it work here, then it would catch on everywhere else. But there's also a third reason that I often say. When I visited Korea for the first time, I talked to a bunch of industry executives and investors. Everyone said, why would you enter the Korea market? It's so competitive and crowded. It's a red ocean. There's just so many players out there. You'll never stand out. And you're not a Korean company, so you won't even know how to market. And for us, we heard that, and all we heard was, there's a ton of people out there that are willing to put in the time and the money to learn English. For us, we believe that we have a product or the ability to create a product that's 10x better than anything else that's out there right now. We believe that with technology, we can truly transform the way people learn English. And so if that's possible, then we should be able to succeed in the most competitive market. In Korea, we launched about 18 months ago. And since then, we've had over 1 million people in Korea use the app. And we one of the fastest growing English apps in the country.
I feel like eating ice cream.
So our big secret sauce for Speak is the speech recognition technology by far. That's really what makes Speak possible. Up until now, speech recognition as a technology just wasn't really good enough for language learning. It just couldn't really understand accurately if you are kind of speaking with an accent that people that are beginners speak with. For us, we really think about ourselves at just as much as a language learning company. We also think about ourselves as a speech technology and a machine learning and an AI company as well. And that is what allows us to build the sort of experience that we enable in Speak, where people actually feel like they're having a conversation with another person, as opposed to just, pressing a button, recording, and then not really getting much feedback. In a nutshell, we want to teach the next billion people how to learn English. And 1.5 billion people right now are trying to learn English, and the success rate is like 4% of those people. We want to make that like 10%, 20%, 30%. Can you imagine a world where actually everyone can kind of speak a common language, whatever that language might be? That's like the high level vision. In the short term, our vision is we want to continue to build the best catalog of content imaginable for learning English. We have an advantage because we teach it based off what we actually use in San Francisco where we're headquartered. We want to invest in machine learning and build out a true artificial intelligence lab where we can continue to push and innovate on the technology side as well. In the case of deep learning and AI and machine learning and where it's gone in the last 5 years, for us starting Speak, we became very convinced that because of this technology, the world was going to change in a multitude of ways. Absolutely convinced. And the simple fact is that it's pretty obvious that in another 5 to 10 years, everyone will be learning by talking to their phone, and you're not going to need that exchange and that practice with other people. We're continuously learning new things and challenging our assumptions when we talk to users. I think one of the biggest things that has been a huge surprise from us is just how many of our users are not students or people in their 20s and 30s that are using English for jobs or for travel, but rather we hear from countless power users who are maybe moms using it for their children, or business executives that are maybe in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, or grandparents who just want to practice speaking English with their grandchildren. And it's always just really neat to be able to see how people are able to now kind of practice speaking English wherever they want, not just in a classroom.